GM. This is Morning Markets. It is Wednesday, the 10th of September, and today we have some inflation data. So we have PPI dropping at 12:30 p.m. UTC, and of course we got CPI tomorrow. PPI tends to not be as important as CPI. That is the producer price index, whereas CPI is the consumer price index. So the consumer always has a little bit more weighting when it comes to this data. That is the main headline and what the Fed use. However, PPI still can be a market mover, especially if the forecast comes in a big miss. So at the moment, we've got 0.3%. That's your month for month forecast. If that has a big miss to the upside or downside when the actual data comes in, that could potentially lead to some decent volatility. But if not, tomorrow should set up for some volatility with CPI. The charts are setting up in a way where it looks like we're going to see a big move very soon, and inflation data can certainly be the catalyst. So, watching PPI today and remembering we also have CPI tomorrow, which can provide the bigger volatility. So, let's see how that goes. Looking at the charts, what are we seeing? So, Bitcoin rejected its 50 EMA again. We've seen this popping up as resistance over and over again. Go to the lower time frames, it becomes a little more clear over here. So what we have got is resistance on Friday, resistance on Monday, resistance yesterday, and even resistance this morning. So it's the clear level to flip. That is super simple. When price gets above this 50 EMA, you want to see Bitcoin then hold that level. So what I mean by that is if we can get a nice volatility catalyst today, or whether that's tomorrow, you want to see a nice break above, which I think, given the resistance has formed 1, 2, 3 times, 4 times even, it won't be a fake out and should lead to a nice initial momentum move, targeting that value area low initially. On any pullbacks, you want to see this really hold. You don't want to see price then revert and fall back into the consolidation, because then that risks a fake out over here as you're falling back into this accumulation, which shouldn't need to happen if the accumulation in fact was strong over here. That should instead allow price to build a base above this consolidation. And then from there, you're just looking for, can we flip the value area low? Can we then hit that POC? And any strength there is going to allow all coins to really, really run. So watch for that level to flip and hold. And potentially the inflation data today can provide that catalyst. And to the downside, you have 110K. Of course, you don't want to lose this level. In between 110 and this 113 high of last week is a pure chop zone. Been mentioning that for a while now, and that's exactly what you see. This is just pure chop. Not much in terms of trades within here. Therefore, if we break below this level, I'd expect momentum to carry this to new lows, as there's a lot of liquidity over here. I think that will require some sort of bearish catalyst. Maybe inflation provides that, but I'm not sure. Because really, you have a lot of bad news on Bitcoin over the past few months, and really all cycle. Bad news doesn't lead to price going lower. You need some sort of deleveraging event, which we don't currently have, and maybe that comes. Maybe there is some black swan overhead that we don't know about, but until then, you had an attack in Qatar yesterday. Bitcoin didn't really care, didn't really move, which shows that bad news isn't enough. You need an actual liquidity contraction event for this chart to have momentum to break lower. So that is good. It does show that Bitcoin has a bid, and it's very simple. As I mentioned in my monthly and weekly outlook, people simply don't want dollars. Yes, Bitcoin might have some profit taking right now as it hit 125k. It's had a really nice run, so that profit taking can simply lead to this downtrend. It's just sellers selling. However, if there's not some huge catalyst like rate hikes or increasing QT, some sort of liquidity negative event, you're not going to see some huge crash. And as I said, maybe there's a black swan coming. I don't know, but investors want to hold assets, and Bitcoin is one of those options, especially when you don't want to hold cash. It can be that simple. And that's why you're seeing bulls try to hold price here. They're trying to keep it sideways. So thoughts on Bitcoin overall here is it's not weak, but it's also not strong when it's in between 110k and 113k. It's really just neutral, or you could argue slight bearish, since we are in a daily downtrend still, since we haven't actually reclaimed the daily market structure over here. However, until 110k breaks, the downtrend isn't set up for continuation, and until this last week's high of 113.3k breaks and that 50 EMA, we're not set for any rally up into higher levels. So that is really it for Bitcoin. And when you compare it to previous times on Bitcoin, so let's look at last September, August price action. Obviously, this is a pretty similar setup here. You're consolidating around these 12 and 21 bands. They're going flat, which can set up for a move higher, whether that move's just a fake out before flushing lower. We then get the real move later on after consolidating. I'm not sure. So yet to be seen whether we're here or whether we are here. Let's remove that for now. But either way, you just want to wait for your daily confirmations and take the trade. Sure, you might get long here when the bands go green, and you might have to exit with your invalidation as the bands go red and take a drawdown, but you then wait for your confirmations again, get long again here, and you capture all of this rally. You don't miss out on the big move. So in trading, at times you have to take a loss to get a win. That is what it's all about. You can't just obsess over capturing the perfect 100% win rate trade. That is really just a fear-based mindset, a fear of losing. You have to have some objective confirmations that you can repeat over time that gets you in and out and allows you to manage risk. And whether that means you take one loss to get a win later on, it doesn't matter, or whether we are even here potentially in this scenario and we are just going to rally to all-time highs, who knows? Or then you get in and have a beautiful setup. So either way, what I'm trying to say here is even if we are bearish and going to form a lower high here, like we did here, like even when the bands go green, it was just a lower high before flushing further down. It still sets up what I would think for a rally on Bitcoin, given we're consolidating, given we're right up against this resistance. Any flip should lead to a nice move, even if that's just a lower high bounce in a downtrend that then has to either go to new lows or, in the bullish scenario, find support and build a higher low and higher high structure. I'm not sure, but either way, looks to be setting up for at least a bounce higher, even if that is bearish and just going to be a lower high. So that's what I'm looking at for Bitcoin. But of course, those are my confirmations to break out of this chop zone between 110 and 113.3. And from there, what's really more interesting is actually altcoins. So I mentioned yesterday in the morning market analysis, Hype was setting up really well, had a daily breakout above this $50 level and of course above all-time high. So sets up for the best momentum trades. And I mentioned on the H1, look for either your 12 and 21 bands to hold. They did get disrespected. You had a lot of closes below. But I also said I expect this H1 impulse candle gap to hold, and that's exactly what happened here. So found support, built a higher low, got to move to new highs. Very nice day trade in there for hype. Nice little scalp. Now we're seeing hype reject at these highs initially. So from here, what I'll be looking for is scenario 1 for hype to close above this 20% deviation level. And then from there, any consolidation, you're looking to get in and trade towards that $60 level over here. That's the trade. It's between $50 to $60 for me. So that can be confluence, of course, with your 12 and 21 bands providing the support, or maybe it's your H150 providing support and it's later on. I'm not sure, but that's what I'd look for. Close above the 20%, that sets up momentum and should allow hype to rally towards $60. That's going to be confluence with Bitcoin breaking above the 50 EMA and last week's high. So that could come off today's inflation data. That's going to allow altcoins to run and see those moves on your strong coins like hype in scenario 1. But if we can't break above today, or if we potentially even break above and then immediately reject and fall back in the range, either scenario, what I then look for on hype is to find support at this 50 EMA on the H1 towards this range low, so close to this 0.25 level on the fib, and ideally you then form that higher low structure again. And that would look something like this. Hype finds supports, continues consolidating, and that sets up a really nice breakout as well. So it's going to be dependent on Bitcoin, but either scenario, those are the ways I'd look to trade it on hype. And of course, if Bitcoin breaks down, breaks below 110K, well, that's probably going to confluence with hype losing this gap here, losing this lovely impulse gap, which has held so far. So from there, you're really just looking for $50 level to hold that big round number, and you can flick to a high time frame. So we've had a daily breakout. You're starting to see momentum slow here. You've got these big upper wicks, which shows sellers are coming in. Breakout buyers are getting overpowered a little bit by the supply. So what can happen there is you can then have to look to your high time frame bands, and these daily 12 and 21 bands, they're going to keep rising up like this, where hype may consolidate, have a flush, and then go back up, and you actually need to then follow your daily trend for moves on hype. That, of course, again, is confluence if Bitcoin has a dip, and then you're going to see those bigger flushes. Or if it comes today, that flush, you could look at something like your 8-hour bands. Something I like to do on these daily breakouts, if it comes soon, is actually look at these ones. Potentially that can provide support and allow you to trade a move higher. So that's what I'm looking at. Those are the 3 scenarios on hype. Trade it on the H1 while Bitcoin is holding up and potentially going to set up a move to the highs. But if we dip lower, then you just have to go to your high time frame trend and find where your support is if this H1 gap is no longer holding. So that's hype. Overall, looks good. Think it still hits $60 before we go below $50. So that's how you set up your clear risk to reward and follow your trend supporting bands as you trade this one. So Solana, that's another interesting one. So I mentioned yesterday that I wanted to see a close above this high. We didn't actually get it as Bitcoin rejected its 50 EMA. Solana had a sell-off and couldn't close above. So really just waiting for Solana to close above this level here on the daily. And if that confirms, then it sets up for a move to this zone here between 240 and of course potentially even the all-time high, who knows. But as I mentioned yesterday, I'd be looking to take profit anywhere in this 240 to, let's say, 260, I believe it was. That was the previous all-time high there, 264. And of course, you've also got that 250 round number in there. So again, waiting for the daily close confirmation above this level. So we actually now have a new level here, new high. Want to see Sol close above there, and then I can go to lower time frames. I can see that it's the H150 EMA, which is providing trend support. So if we close above here today, I'll be looking for any consolidations to find support, whether it's at the fast trend bands or whether it's actually at these 100 H150 EMA, where I then get long. I'm not sure, but that's what I'll be looking for on Sol. That daily trigger, and then to look for momentum setups to trade to 240, because I don't think Solana should go below, especially this high here, if we do have a confirmed breakout, because we've had so many attempts now to break out that failed. Charts are really setting up for a momentum breakout that's going to now hold and actually lead to potentially even a fast move higher, where you can't even get on board on those lower time frames. That, of course, is going to be down to Bitcoin, as I mentioned, and it could be catalyzed by the inflation data today, but charts seem to be setting up for a big move if you can see it, especially to the upside. So that's the confirmation I'm waiting for on Solana to look for trades. When it comes to gold, so I told you guys I'm looking for the H150 EMA to provide support, and we got a nice flush to the H150 EMA, and so far seeing a decent bounce here. So nice move there on gold. We have seen this H150 EMA provide support the whole way up. Even if we close below briefly, it gets bought up and you then make new highs and rally higher. See it time and time again. That time it wicked and rallied higher. This time it closed below and rallied higher. Overall, it's provided support in this rally. So that's why I mentioned this was where you should look for to bid on gold. And what we're seeing here so far was a sell-off overnight. So you had this initial rejection at the 3,700 round number level. Sellers came in there, got a flush to the H150, now bouncing. So this is the level to flip in the New York session, 3.7K for bulls to remain in control. If we reject at 3.7K, well then that potentially opens up for a pullback on gold, where we have to see it spend some time consolidating, maybe even dip lower, or maybe it's just a shallower consolidation like this before higher. Point being is this consolidation here should allow Bitcoin to really outperform. I mentioned this a lot in the monthly and weekly outlook, but if you see the Bitcoin gold ratio, it's actually been pretty bearish recently because the latest Bitcoin rally couldn't lead to a new high on Bitcoin against gold, which is not what you want to see. You want to see capital rotate from gold into Bitcoin. Therefore, if gold consolidates, be on the lookout on this chart. Bitcoin should outperform. Otherwise, we're seeing something different. And ideally make a new high. I'm not sure if that does happen, but at the bare minimum, you should see that outperformance, even if it then has to consolidate for longer. So keep an eye on this chart. It does mark all the big bottoms and tops for Bitcoin. Obviously, at April 7th, this marked the bottom on Bitcoin. You had January 20th, that was the exact top on Bitcoin, and the top on this Bitcoin to gold chart. So it is important. I mean, I can show you guys right now so you can visualize. Let's go on the daily, weekly chart even. Let's hide these. So as you can see, the exact same day Bitcoin topped out here. So did the Bitcoin gold chart. And then similarly to the downside, the exact day this bottomed out here, so did the Bitcoin gold chart over here. So it's a really important chart. You need to see this continue with strength if gold does consolidate and go sideways. But that, of course, is going to be up to this 3.7k level, and really watch that in the New York session. That's what you want to look out for to see if we flip it or if we reject it. And it's best for Bitcoin if we, of course, reject it and have to then consolidate. So that is everything for gold. We look at stocks quickly. Great move on stocks right up to the highs, which is interesting because stocks, they're breaking out to all-time highs, while Bitcoin is really not anywhere near its all-time highs relatively when you compare it to stocks. Obviously, we're only 13% down, but still, Bitcoin's broken down from its range, whereas stocks are trying to break out in price discovery. So there is some Bitcoin weakness here. Not sure how long that persists for, but it's key to note that the flows are going to stocks. Maybe Bitcoin is just lagging. That'll be shown today or tomorrow by a big move, I would expect. But stocks, they're setting up well. If they can now start closing above this blue box, sets up for a nice move higher. And really, you're just seeing this slow grind higher in the US stock market. So pretty nice so far. Anything above this all-time high is still bullish. And I'd expect continuation on this chart. So other than that, looking at total 3, coming right up to the upper end of this compression pattern. So like I said, inflation data could set up for a big move today or tomorrow. That's how the charts are setting up. You want to see a clean close above here, either today or tomorrow, if we do get that catalyst, and then to break this high. That will allow the momentum rallies on altcoins. Any rejection here is going to lead to more chop and consolidation and potentially some lower moves to take out liquidity. So that's what we're looking at. Charts are really should go very soon now. You're right against resistance. You've been compressing for a while. It's really now or never for altcoins to make a move. And that's why I think we could actually see some really decent moves today or tomorrow as we set up this pre-FOMC positioning week. And this is the others chart, same story. Come right against this compression pattern that I mentioned yesterday, and we just need to now flip it. And that should set up a momentum move, whether it's a big move initially and consolidation to trend higher, or whether we see more chop, I don't know, but should really flip that very soon here. And that move, I think, will be decided in the next few days. Of course, you got the rejection scenario where we then have to take some liquidity. So keep an eye on these charts. Got Bitcoin dominance, still falling, still favoring risk assets and altcoins. This 50-week EMA has been the gauge that I've mentioned all cycle, and ever since we lost it, also been doing well. Only other thing to mention is ETH very quickly. It's not really interesting at all. You're just having this chop, which is building value actually lower. So on Ethereum, you almost need to see a dip to prove demand. Because if you get a dip here and then price reclaims, well, on the reclaim, that is your bullish signal. Bulls defended the market structure level. This is your daily market structure. But while we are just chopping here, there's just no edge. Could go up, could go down. You're at a 50-50 odds here. And I would bet that the way it's setting up, it does want to move lower. So from there, you want to see, does it reject or do we reclaim? And on the reclaim, you can then look to get long and potentially play momentum again on ETH. But altcoins have actually been moving very well due to the fact that Ethereum is weak, because Ethereum tends to take flows away from altcoins. It tends to take all the liquidity, whereas when Ethereum's weak, it actually allows Solana, allows Hype to have some really nice runs, and also other altcoins. I know some low caps are moving lately. So that's what's interesting. I think these altcoins outside of ETH are going to give you your best setups if Bitcoin can close above some of these resistance levels. But until then, expect chop and watch out for PPI, which drops at 12:30 p.m. UTC today. So that's going to be the potential mover. And then, of course, we got CPI tomorrow, which if today's not going to provide a big move, that probably provides the big move for the week. So watch out for that. That is morning markets wrapped up.